Welcome back to 30 Days Still in Photoshop. This is day 27, filters. My name's Ben Gribbin, and in today's lesson we're going to look at how filters are used and also how they affect our images. So first off, what are filters? Well, it's a good question. We're going to show you on this house that we made in our previous lesson. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the filter menu. We're going to look at a couple of the filter options and also the filter gallery. So let's just remove the colouring changes we made to the document. We're going to just do a quick demonstration of some of the basic sort of tools and filters that you can get. So we're just going to roughly, and I mean roughly, select the house using the freeform lasso tool, just selecting its kind of rough outline, any objects connected to it. We're going to show you first blur, which is something that you're going to want to use probably quite a bit. So we'll select the layer we want to change, go to filter and go to blur. If one of the filters has three dots next to it, i.e. a continuing the periods, then it means it's going to have extra settings that you need to work on, whereas these ones here just are click and it'll do it. So we're just going to go on Gaussian blur. This is sort of the go-to blur for adding in things like depth of field and just blurring out backgrounds. So we can actually change now, you see, the blur of the background. We can in effect separate the house a little bit from its background here. We could do then a history brush on the bottom here just to bring these back into sharpness. So we can create kind of faux depth of field, which is really interesting effect to be able to do. So that worked pretty well. So that's what filters are really. They just are literally filters you can apply over your image to create all kinds of different effects and appearance. And we're going to look at a couple more of the blur ones now, because there are some more blurs that are going to prove very useful. Motion blur, this is something you're probably going to use in, particularly if you're working with moving objects. It helps blur in the background. So if we wanted to make it look like our house was moving, we could apply blur to the background like so. We could do some more work on the house as well. And you can see it's making the house, or at least the camera, appear as though that is moving. We can do filters to certain areas of an image, and we can repeat it by going to filter and just clicking on this option here. So this now kind of looks like the house is shaking or moving about, just using two filters there. And also we've got the ability to do a radial blur, which is a kind of spinning blur. So let me just turn that on. This would make your house look as though it's spinning around in some sort of manner. That's quite an extreme effect, and you'll notice because it's distorting and pulling the image, it's actually started to make it transparent at the top because we've run out of things to be able to blur. So let's just do a little less strong radial blur. So let's turn that down. This doesn't have a preview on it, so it is a little bit sometimes of kind of just experiment, see what happens. So that's radial blur. You can use that on circles, on wheels. Another feature of the radial blur is if you change this one setting here from spin to zoom, it then zooms the blur, so that now appears as though the background or the house is being drawn into focus. So just some interesting effects you can get from blur in particular. There's loads and loads of filters, and unfortunately we don't have time to cover them all. But let's have a look at pixelate, which is one of my favourite ones, and particularly mosaic. This is the sort of effect you see when they blur out people's faces or car registration plates on TV programs and stuff. That's the sort of effect you get. You can also create kind of faux 8-bit computer graphic images with it. It's quite an interesting effect. If we were to do it to the whole of our image, it kind of makes the house just look like we've made it on a really old school graphics editor. So that's an interesting effect. You can do pixelation. There's actual loads of different types of pixelation. You can do pointillize, and it's just a matter of playing around, seeing what happens, and just changing the effects and experimenting with them. Something else that's quite useful, particularly if you're working with older images and you want to blur in or fade in parts, you can go to noise and add noise. There's all kinds of different options here. You can add dust and scratches, you can blur, you can soften out the image, you can do all kinds of stuff really. Add pretend damage, you can add noise, like just go into noise, add noise, and setting the amount of noise you want to add. We can create a sort of old school photograph. We can make sure it's more uniform or as a kind of blurred pattern. You can set it to black and white. If we were applying this to a layer above, we could fade it in and out. We can also use a filter called render, and this is used quite a lot in as sort of the base for creating computer graphics. Creating clouds in particular is the start of many options and many effects. If you were to create clouds, it just makes the two foreground colours, the foreground colour and the background colour, into a cloud effect, which you could then go to blur and do like a radial blur on, just do a spin just very quickly, and you can see we're starting to make some really cool and extreme effects. And then finally, the filter gallery is kind of different to filters because in effect it combines a group of filters to make certain effects. So let's just zoom out. This is our preview here, and we've got 6 different groups of filters we can apply. We can make sort of pretend coloured pencil drawings. It's using our foreground colour here. We can do cutouts, so these are like collages. We can do all kinds of stuff using this tool. It's very handy. It's quite fun to play around with, so experiment, play around with it, see what you can create. There's so many different styles and options here that it'll probably keep you entertained for quite a while. So just play around, see what you can find. There's some effects that you think, well, I've probably never used that, but you would be quite surprised. And some of these are really good just for creating faux paintings and drawings and pastel paintings, all kinds of stuff. Really different, really interesting. There's literally about 2 or 3 dozen, so check them out, see what you can do with them. There's lots of different ones, and you'll be able to create a lot of different effects. However, if you wanted to apply filters to your image but still be able to edit the image without losing it, basically you're going to want to make your object into a smart object. So let's do that. We've just created a smart object. We've already discussed how to do that. If you go to filter, and now when we apply any of these, let's do a filter gallery. So let's turn it into a pretend drawing, or a very dark drawing. Let's just do it like this. Change the spray length, change the radius, something like that. Press OK. Then when we go on to edit the image in our original smart object, you see it's OK, but it will apply effects to any changes we make to this document. So let's say we've done that. We're going to save that. Go back, you can see it's added in those effects. So that's quite useful for being able to edit blurs and just being able to change the strength of the filter and effects you've applied. You can actually turn down the opacity just by double clicking on it. You can change the actual filter itself. So it's quite handy and very, very useful once you've had a bit of a play around with it. So what have we learned in today's lesson? Well, we've considered basic filters, and we've also looked at the filter gallery. And your task for this lesson is to experiment with different styles and filters on an image of your choice. Next time on 30 Days to Learn Photoshop, we'll be looking at a combination of tools, the dodge, burn, sponge and smudge tools. Thanks for listening.